Now we come to another storage mechanism that is used in Android. That is the Android SQLite database storage. What is an Android SQL database? Android SQL database is actually very similar to a normal SQL database that we have used before, in which we make JDBC or OBDC connections. First of all, and to connect to the database, and then when the connection is established, then we retrieve, add, delete data, or read data, or read DELET, or read data. This just like a similar SQL database. This is a very structured storage of data. For example, you have tables with columns and rows. The tables are interlinked with each other. And for example, if we have a login table in which you have the login info, for example, your username, ID, and password, then you have, for example, contract table to have your contract information, like when it's start date, end date of the contract, whose name is the contract, your address, and all these things. So your company information, a company table, for example, and employee information, and all those things. So, what is the difference of the SQLite database with the normal SQL database? The difference is that in the case of an SQLite database, you do not require to make these JDBC etc. connections. They are not required. This data is actually a built-in a database inside the Android, which using certain APIs, for example, just like you have used for shared preference, you have provided with certain APIs, and using those APIs and the functions provided by those APIs, you can actually uh, uh, kind of get the object for the database and handle the read, write, and adding and deleting operations, or adding new tables and creating tables inside the database. These kind of operations. This is an open source database, and it is relational. It's not a non-relational database, just like the SQL database. They are relational, and the storage mechanism in this database is a text file. A text file storage is used. So this is important to know, because in the case of shared preferences, we have say, for example, preference.xml, whatever the name of the preference file, a .xml file was saved. But in this case of SQLite databases, we have text file storage. uh, and yeah, as said, it is used for structured and repeating data. For example, it is different activities. If we need to know need to get from a certain contract table, or from a certain contact table, or an employee table. For example, in the case of a performance management employee performance management app, we might need, for example, when the employee is coming or when he's going, or which project he's working on, start time of the project or end time of the project. So we may be able to record or retrieve this information, to kind of build the employees and all those things, and to see which employees are free, which are not free. So we need this information. We will need this information in multiple activities, then in multiple functionalities, and the data will be repeating. The access of the data will be quite repeating. So that's why in this case we use an SQLite database information instead of shared preference, and using the SQLite database information, we can save a little bit, kind of a much more information than that of a shared preference, which is used for mainly for the starting or the early information, saving the early information in the case of an app. So the SQLite database is much more, you can say, powerful, and much more, you can say, flexible than a shared preference. So whenever we have a little bit bigger data to handle with, we will use the SQLite database instead of the shared preferences. So the APIs for the SQLite database are contained in this package. This package is Android database.sqlite package. So and the two important classes are SQLite database and SQLite open helper class. These two classes are very important, and they contain very important functions. we can get the SQLite database object using this class SQLite database, and the function that is used is open or create database. If we use only open database, it is only going to open the existing database and not create it. But if we use the method open or create database, it here we provide provide the database name, any name, my database, employee database, or contract database, or calling app database. We have to provide a string name here, and this is the mode private, just like we had modes for the shared preferences. This mode private means that this database is only going to be used by the app that is creating it. And so this OpenRK database is actually going to create a database as well if it is not existing, and if it exists, it's just going to open it and provide us with this database object. And with this database object, we can use to create, delete, or add, and all those things to tables and all those things to the database. Normal database operations, just in the case of a normal SQL database. So we can write here the few of the functions that it provides is create, delete, delete, or execute SQL commands. For example, create database, delete database, and SQL commands, and other, for example, some other database management tasks. And now we come to the SQL Open Helper class. Why we use this SQL Open Helper class? This helper class is also helping to create and manage the database, and manage the update in the database. For example, if we want to change or insert, for example, some record, or delete some record, or modify some record, or read some record from inside the database, we use we can also say the term update is better instead of modify. Update. So we use the SQL Open Helper class for this purpose.